Hey, we are live. We'll wait until a couple of people get on here. It takes a little time, and everything. But while we're here, I just want to thank you for coming on. I'm going to say your name, Bushra Amiwala. Hopefully, I
Oh,
said that correctly.
yeah,
All
right.
right, good. Running for Congress in Illinois' Ninth District. Tell us a little bit about, you know, how that came to be and what made you decide to do this.
Absolutely. So my story is incomplete without my parents' story first. My parents came to the United States from Karachi, Pakistan in the 80s. They literally had a $20 bill and built their life brick by brick in Illinois 9. My dad's a small business owner, my mom's a teacher, and I grew up attending Chicago public schools, moved to the north side in Skokie when I was 9, and one of the best things I've been able to do is to be an elected school board member representing the public schools I attended growing up. So when my congresswoman announced retirement, I went on a market research tour and talked to 200 people that live in our community asking who can we be excited about. And a lot of those conversations ended with, well, if not you, then who?
And I think that's something that everyone who decides to get into public service kind of does. I want to go back to a little bit about your upbringing and everything. I know if I ran for school board in the city where I grew up, a lot of my old teachers would be like, "Not that guy," you know. So what was the kind of what was the feedback from everyone who had grown up with you, your former teachers, principals, and everyone like that?
So it's awesome because by the time I ran for the school board, I was actually still an undergrad at that point. So a lot of my old teachers, administrators, even the superintendent were the same as they were from when I was a kid attending these schools. And it's a K through 8 school. So I was in third through eighth grade. And a lot of them still remembered who I was, which I'm like, are you sure you did? Like, I feel like I'm like, so I like look different. I'm older, but a lot of them knocked on doors with us. They wrote postcards to voters with us. And that's a testament to being rooted in the space that you're hoping to represent.
And I've seen so many people who decided to go for, I mean, you were young though. I think you were 21 years old when you decided to run for school board. I mean, what motivates you at 20? I mean, I'm not even going to talk about what I was doing at 21 years old, but you were like, you know what? I'm trying to change the world right now.
I was 19 when I first ran for public office, and I was 21 by the time I got elected. And to me, like this community gave me so much. Genuinely, like my upbringing in Skokie in the ninth congressional district changed my life. I see what my parents started with and where we ended up with, and it came from a spirit of gratitude. My spirit of service is rooted in this place of giving back to the community that makes me so special. And I think when that was at risk, it pained me like on a personal level, I took offense to that and knew it was a responsibility to actively fight back, fight against, and advocate for what I care about.
And what are the things you care about the most? Like, what would you say? What do you want people to know about you? Why should they want you as a member of Congress?
I'm the person that has lived through the real problems that everyday people have faced and have learned how to solve them with teams. And that to the core is exactly the type of person we need representing us in Washington. And I also say anyone who can make it through school board governance successfully, and now I've been serving for 7 years, you can get through anything. School board politics are so personal, and a lot of the information that we get shared can't be shared out in the public. So we have pieces of information that others can't know. So to be a transparent leader in spite of those barricades is another thing that I'm really proud about too.
Nice, nice. So, in case you guys are just joining us, we're talking with Bushra Amiwala. She's running for Congress in Illinois' Ninth District. I think I want to talk a little bit about the elections on Tuesday. I'm pretty sure you were tuned into that. I'm looking at a lot of your platform, and I think it sits with things that I believe in as well. What did you think of just this? I guess we can call it a blue wave that happened on Tuesday. And even and I'm telling you, I'm 50 years old, and I not by no stretch of the imagination do I think I'm old or anything like that. But I'm looking at the young leaders that are out there, and I'm just like I've been saying this for so long. Like, allow these young people to lead, because I feel like your generation and people younger than me are at a point where you've seen people my age struggle. You've seen us at the protest. You've seen us do our thing, and just to go on a little bit here, I was at a No Kings protest in Ventura, California. And one of the things that shocked me the most is like how many people that were there in the ages like from 60 to 80 years old. And I was telling my wife and my daughter, you know, my wife is in my age group, my daughter's 24 years old. I was like, I wonder if these people are just like, I'm tired of this. Like I mean, these men and women are in their 70s and they're out there holding up signs that say like no kings, and I'm just like, gosh, you know. And then I see the youth, you know, yourself, obviously Zoran Mandami. I mean, like I see these people coming, you know, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, and I'm just like, we need to step to the side and allow them to lead. So, you know, I know I ran on a lot there, but I want to get your take on Tuesday and what you think of the youth leadership that is kind of coming up in America right now.
So when I talk about generations, the way that I frame it is that generations have the most common than any other demographic subsect that exists. Meaning you can put together a group of people of the same gender, a group of people of the same racial background, same ethnic background, group of people of the same religion, and you put together a group of people from the same generation. And by and bar, always true, the group from the same generation has more in common than any other group. And I bring that up because my generation, Gen Z, we are the people that have always seen our climate on fire. We're the generation that grew up with lockdown drills in school, yet maybe never questioned why that's the case until we got a little bit older. We're the generation that knew that if we wanted to go to college, we would have to overperform in high school, yet still be in student debt as soon as we graduate. We're the generation that saw, like, I remember I used to read through a dictionary to translate words and know what some words meant from my parents as a personal translator. And I also know when Google existed. I was in high school when I got a cell phone. Like, we saw all of that. And we are that transitionary generation to actually capably lead. And I'm rejecting the notion that Gen Z just wakes up and is fighting. Like, we have constantly been involved in this space and process because we've seen it from every single transition period right now. So I was the first person of my generation to ever be elected to public office, which I'm particularly proud about. So I'm rewriting the narrative that Gen Z is not just getting elected. We've been getting elected. We've been leading. And it's time that people make space for us to do so as well.
And I'm so impressed by that. You know, I was on a live with a MAGA one time, and he was, you know, talking about how Gen Zs are dumb, you know, and he's like, and I'm telling him, you know, I have two daughters, one who's 24 years old, one who's 20 years old, and they're not dumb at all. You know, they both attend very good colleges. They're both track athletes. They're both smart people. And he's like, no, I could scam your daughters out of their bank accounts right now. And I'm like, do you have kids? He's like, yeah, I have two kids. And they're dumb as heck. And I'm just like, what are you? I mean, that's your problem. Like, I mean, yeah. I listen to you speak and talk about, you know, your generation and what you guys are doing and what you're ready to do. And I don't hear someone who's not in tune with what is going on. I have to ask, like, I talk a lot on my channel about, you know, the misogyny, racism, things like that. And I just, it makes me sick to my stomach to hear some of the things that I had to hear, you know, many of, you know, your Zoran Mamdani, just that Black people have to hear, brown people have to hear. How are you dealing with some of that? Because I'm sure you get, you know, so much misogyny, racism, and even, you know, ageism thrown at you for just the person that you are.
The first time I was running for public office, I actually was on a live interview kind of similar to this. And the host literally said, Bushra, with ageism, racism, sexism, and Islamophobia all working against you, which would you say is the worst? Not the game show I signed up to be on, but I remember innately answering sexism without hesitation. Yet today I reflect on that answer and I almost think I have a slightly different answer, and it would be, I would say it's racism more now, which is interesting because back then, this was now 7-8 years ago, it was the intersection of my identity as a woman that made every other ism and phobia net worse. Yet now I find that regardless of your gender, if you are someone of a different racial ethnic background, you automatically have this preconceived notion automatically projected towards you that cannot be concealed. And it's interesting because the answer changes every time and it's different for everyone, but we are seeing even the forces that were advocating and spending millions of dollars against Zoran Mamdani, their entire talking point was Islamophobia and xenophobia. That is all that they had. It was that type of fear mongering to try to prevent someone who had actual concrete ideas. And we're already seeing that happen to someone like me as well. Every time I speak out against ICE's activity and or advocating for immigrant communities, or even something that I would think is as trivial and normalized as Indigenous Peoples Day, I get inundated with comments of, well, go back to where you came from, which is so ironic because even in a race like mine where there's 17 candidates, I'm the only one that was born and raised in this community and has lived here my entire life. So it's used as that weapon to continuously otherize me just because of what I look like.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. And how do you, I mean, do you, what are you doing? What do you do to combat that? How does that, affect like your everyday? I know as a Black person growing up where I grew up in a smaller, more conservative town. It did some things to me that, I feel like I am fighting against still unto this day. How are you, is it something that you just go, I'm just going to impress people with my stance on things. I'm going to impress people with, what I want to do for their community more than I want to deal with, even though it's something that, like you said, it's not a game show you signed up for, but it's a game show that you're going to be on for the rest of your life.
I've just accepted that someone that looks like me, someone that looks like you, we have to work twice as hard as our white counterparts. We have to quadruple dot our I's and triple cross our T's just to get the same level of impress from someone that is being mediocre at this point. But I do think acceptance is the first step of release. And I've been someone who's continuously been an overperformer. And I think you probably have seen that in your own upbringing. And a lot of young people of color have been people who have constantly been overperforming in their own circles to meet what that moment looks like. And then I also remind myself, focus on what I can control. And the two things that I can control are my intention and my intentions to make a positive difference and my effort. And my effort is how I show up every single day. And the rest literally is beyond my control. Thankfully now, every time I see hate comments, it's online. And I'm like, okay, like these are bots. These aren't real people. These aren't folks I actually know. And we live in a pretty welcoming community, I'll say. So that helps separate the two as well.
So let's talk a little specifically about some of the things that you believe in. I know, reading on your website these things, but I want to know just from you, maybe give me a couple of the top issues that we're facing here in America and how you're going to go to Washington, D.C. and fight for those. And I think something that a lot of people don't really understand is that, government is not, it's not right now. Things happen very slowly. And so I would never ask someone, oh, what are you going to do tomorrow? I think politicians get in trouble by trying to say, I can go to Washington and I can get these things done today. But what are the things that you think, you guys give me an opportunity to represent this area, I'm going to do these things.
Mm-hmm. So what's nice is Illinois' 9th congressional district is a safe blue area. I mean, it's home to the most progressive community in the state of Illinois. And that is the bar that we are starting at when it comes to looking at the progressive champion that we had representing this community prior to her retirement. That being said, the three things: first is healthcare. Yes, I can say healthcare is a human right. It absolutely is. But I found that taking a step further and reminding people that it's the economically viable, fiscally responsible, logical mode for our country to adopt to, suddenly that's inviting an entire new subsect of people that historically hear single payer healthcare model, universal healthcare, and just turn their brains off because they think that it's never possible. And then I remind people with another fun fact. Out of the 33 industrialized countries in the world, we are the only one that does not have a universal healthcare model. So we are the outliers in that way. The second piece is in general affordability. I mean, we hear from people that we talk to every single day in this community that goods, gas, and groceries are far too expensive and people are just trying to survive right now. And then on top of that, we see our communities being terrorized by institutions like ICE. And the final piece is just education. Genuinely, like what's really special about the community that I'm running in is that we are home to some of the most high schools in this community. So we have a lot of people that are thinking about going to college and are parents to college students as well. And it is seen as inaccessible and unaffordable. And the affordability crisis that we're in right now is actually the root to every single thing that I brought up. Socioeconomic disparity is not talked about often enough. And that's why I'm a product of that upbringing. And I'm proud to be a genuine champion for these issues.
I want to talk about fiscal responsibility because you brought that up. And I think Democrats get a, kind of what's a bad name when it comes to fiscal responsibility. And I'm going to admit something right now that most of my viewers already know, but I considered myself a Black conservative back when I was like 19, 20 years old, because I really believed in fiscal responsibility. And I really believed that the Republican Party believed in that. As I got older and smarter, I realized they didn't believe in fiscal responsibility. So please explain to people how giving healthcare for all would be the fiscally responsible thing to do, as opposed to what we have right now going on.
So right now we have privatized insurance, which is a for-profit middleman that works between the person that needs the care that they need and a myriad of healthcare providers. So you have your doctor, you have your specialist, you have the insurance company themselves. Like, these are all now separate institutions that are privatized, that are responsible for your care, as opposed to a one-stop shop solution. So right now what we have is we have corporations, public institutions, and individuals all pay into a private insurance model. It's a reallocation of funds that go in this department that are publicly dispersed, and you'll have to pay less. It's actually a cheaper option, because now when that gets dispersed through taxes as opposed to a privatized model, people now have an expanded access to the care that they need. And it's better for doctors and healthcare providers too, who don't have to go through hoops to get people the care that they need and deserve as well.
That's great. I think, and I'm glad you explained that. And I think Democrats should do a better job of explaining how they are really the fiscally responsible party, because I think we really are. Affordability. We hear a lot about people saying we need to have grocery prices lower. We need to have gas prices lower. We need to have things lower so that people can afford them. This is something that won a lot of Democrats their seats, gubernatorial seats in this last election. And I actually think that's going to happen during the midterms as well. How do these things happen, though? I think we hear it all the time. It seems to be, I don't know how often it goes past the talking point. How do we get to the point where we can, how do we do it without, I don't know, without being called these bad terms like communists and all these things?
Yeah. We look at inflation, we look at Trump's tariffs, and we look at minimum wage. And these three are all intersected and rooted within fighting the same affordability crisis right now. So what we see right now is the cost of something like eggs, as an example. Eggs were $12 the beginning of this year, right? When we look at 1990s, eggs were 89 cents. That makes no sense, that price increase. And it is not okay. That is an inflation-related cause. That means there is a lack of regulation, and that also means that there is not a productive and sustainable way to provide us as Americans the food that we need to feed our families on the table. The second thing is Trump-related tariffs. We know that tariffs only negatively impact us as consumers and us as everyday individuals, because we see corporations put that influxed cost right back on the person that will be purchasing those items. It is an incredibly irresponsible thing that was imposed amongst our communities. And the last thing, I look at minimum wage as an example. So we're talking about inflation, we're talking about rising costs, but for some reason, when we've seen egg prices skyrocket over 1,000%, why has our minimum wage only gone up $4? Right? These are the types of things that you just can't speak about one without speaking about the other. And I think both Democrats and Republicans are used to having one-liners and trying to come to something without addressing the root cause of how we've gotten here to begin with. And that is something that I'm proud of not only this generation, but every thoughtful leader that is championing beyond the headlines.
I agree. And I think, so I guess I also want to know then so you get to Congress, right? And obviously when you get there, you're not going to be walking in with a lot of weight because you're a freshman or whatever, What do you do? How do you address these things and actually get some movement on them? I think, Trump's tariffs, for instance, on one hand, he's like, we're in the golden age of the economy. This is a great economy. We're at a point we don't even show jobs numbers anymore because he knows that those numbers are bad. How do you go in there with, especially unless, obviously, if the Democrats can get the majority, you're going to have a little bit more weight. Let's say you get you get there. What's the first thing you try and do? What are the things you try to do to get your voice heard, to get some movement on these issues that, frankly, a lot of people in America think are very, very important?
Well, I remind people that I'm not inventing the wheel. There's a group of representatives in the House right now that are advocates and champions for all of the different pieces of legislation that I've brought up, from Rep. Ayanna Pressley to Rep. Pramila Jayapal to anyone that is affiliated with the squad. And I'm now an additional co-sponsor to the legislation that they are putting forward. I'm not suddenly the magic answer that is putting these forth. I am now an extension and an ally of the existing work that is happening. And now the goal is that there's powers in numbers. You think about even something like universal health care, the first time that Senate bill was written by Senator Sanders, and how many co-sponsors it had then and how many it has now. So these are the types of things that I hope to be additive towards, as opposed to thinking that I, as a singular entity, am the solution. I'm not. And I will never promise or pretend that it's just me.
If there were other things that you could think of that maybe people aren't thinking of that you'd like to do, communities that you'd like to advocate for more, what would those be?
So, as an education wonk, someone who's been on an elected board of education for the past 7 years, I've written my own piece of legislation called the Books Not Bombs Act. And this would take 1% from the defense budget and lead to a 10% increase in public funding for education. Right now, public schools in my community, on average, get 2% of their funding from federal funding sources. That puts the burden on property taxpayers, renters, and homeowners. And if we did this transfer allocation, they would all save thousands of dollars a year annually, and it would push back against the institutional racism that exists socioeconomically, to mean that your zip code won't determine the quality of life and access to public schools your kids receive.
Which is so important. It's something that I talk to people a lot about, because I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I moved to California, to a smaller town in California. So where I grew up was a predominantly Black, underfunded community, right? I moved into a predominantly white, very well-funded community, and what you find with that is that you give resources to any community, and you're going to see that community thrive. I'm an educator myself. My wife is an educator. My wife teaches 5th grade. I teach college, and I teach in a health program. I talk about this a lot, in an EOP&S program, where all of my students get, a free meal every day. They get their books for free. They get a backpack. They get their tuition paid for. The success rate and retention level of that program is so high because you're taking away the stressors that a lot of these students typically deal with when they don't have the adequate, resources. And I think it's important that you say that. And I want you to maybe even elaborate on that more about how resources can help to, when we talk about right now, Donald Trump, he thinks if we just over police areas, we're going to make things better. The problem with those types of things is that when the police are gone, if the resources aren't there, you will still have the crime. So not to answer the question for you, but please expand on, giving resources to communities that need them the most and how that helps those communities.
I talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you have the
Oh,
triangle, and on the bottom of it is survival. And if we're
mhm.
forcing people to be trapped in the cycle of survival, thinking when their next meal is happening, how are they going to pay for their Wi-Fi bill? Where will their next clean clothing come from, right? Suddenly, how can you focus on something like learning? How can you focus on something like assimilating, adjusting, and making friends in schools, right? Those are all lateral thoughts that cannot exist if people are still in survival mode. So actually, apart from just the education system, I think this is directly related when it comes to advocating for working people and unionized efforts as well. So the example I'll give you is I talk about increasing efficiency, and people will again freeze up and think I'm talking about automation. I'm not. I'm talking about paid mental health days, expanding sick leave, giving people longer times off for maternity leave. That increases productivity, that increases our mental health, expands clarity, and makes you a better and more productive contributor to the workplace as well. It's not always pushing people beyond their limits, because I think in America, we've prided that culture. I look at Finland as an example. And the same thing goes for education in our schools. If you have kids that are unsure of how they'll help their parents pay bills, or they're looking over their younger sibling after school, then you can't pain them for not turning in their homework the next day, right? We've seen this struggle be weaponized and policed when it's actually not something that should be. There's this dire need of extra care, attention that these people deserve.
Why do you think it's so hard to get that across to people? Someone had just put in the chat, books not bombs. Yes, and I completely agree. I think it is unfortunate in this country that my wife and I, we spend so much of our money, and we don't mind doing it. Like when we got into education, we knew this was going to be a part of it. But tissue, toilet paper, my wife always, with fifth graders, they run around in PE, and she has to have air freshener in
Yeah.
her room at all times. But we pay for that.
Yeah.
And it's like teachers have to do that.
Yeah.
There's never a GoFundMe to have a war. There's
Yeah.
never a give, send, go when we need to go and fight against another country.
Yeah.
But when a teacher wants to buy Kleenex or tissue for their students, they have to have, fundraising efforts for that.
Yeah.
And so why do you think it's so hard to get this empathy across to people? Like you said, if we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right now, the bottom level is basic needs, right?
Yep.
Right now, we're arguing in this country about giving people their basic needs.
Yeah.
And in any case, like, we feed students now in K through 8 here in California because we have realized if you fulfill their basic needs, they're more likely to learn. Why do you think it's so hard for us to kind of get that point across to the right? And I know, listen, a lot of times on my channel, I say, I'm done with reaching across the aisle. My job now is to get more of us to just get off the couch and make sure we vote, because I think there's more of us than there are of them. I think it's better to just motivate us.
Yeah.
But as someone who's running for office, where you probably believe that reaching across the aisle is important, how do you get get people to be more empathetic and want to fulfill people's basic needs?
First, it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful that is what's up for debate and discussion. And that's why we're in a government shutdown right now as well, just to address the elephant in the room. But what I will say is the reason it's difficult is because you think about the barriers stacked against someone who has made it through the system to get to something like the House, right? We don't have enough leaders that have genuinely actually faced these struggles to truly be able to advocate and champion for this group of our country that exists, because it's impossible to make it out. Like, those are how starkly these odds are stacked against us. So for someone like me who grew up in Section 8 housing, who grew up on SNAP, for me, this is beyond personal. For me, I needed FAFSA to go to school. This is all so personal. I don't need to read up on what FAFSA is. I don't need to read up on how much FAFSA is annually, yet in spite of that, the barrier between my tuition cost at a private university. I don't need to Google these things. I know what that is. I know what that looks like. And if it's not just me within myself, it's within the people that live in my community. These are people I know. These are not just folks that exist in a vacuum that are in this other territory. Like, these are my neighbors. These are my friends. These are the people I went to school with. And that personal touch is what's missing. Because, yeah, to your point, I agree, like, reaching across the aisle is kind of overrated, but it's not just Democrats versus Republicans. It's the 1% versus all of us. And to even go further, it's bought versus unbought. And that is what's making it incredibly difficult, because in order to make it on the inside, you sometimes have to get bought because of how impossible it is with the odds stacked against you. But that's why for someone like me, lived experience, these relationships, this genuinity, this sincerity, you can't buy that. Literally, no matter how much money I raise, I would not be able to buy what I've been able to earn as an extension and product of this neighborhood. And that's why I'm so proud to have so many people across so many different backgrounds championing my candidacy in this district as well.
That's great. I think you touched on something important too, that, the banks, the rich people, they have advocates, they have, lobbyists and everything like that. And poor people don't. And that's why a lot of times they don't have a voice. And so you giving them that voice is very important. I know we're getting close on time here. I wanted to ask you, when you're not, doing this, because I mean, you've been absolutely impressive. I watch a lot of interviews. I do a lot of homework on this stuff. And a lot of times people try to get around the answers of questions. And I think you've been very candid and very transparent. And I do appreciate that. When you're not doing this, because it seems like you're doing this a lot, what do you do just to chill, to have fun, or, just like not have the weight of the world is what I feel like is on you right now. How do you just kind of, I guess, separate yourself from the politics and all of that?
I go on these things called mute walks where I leave my phone at home and I'll walk for 30 minutes in the morning. And it's so good because now it prevents racing thoughts throughout the day. I have a huge sweet tooth and I like baking sweet treats, and folks on my team and volunteers are always dropping off homemade baked goods. So I don't mind a dopamine rush in that way. I'll pay for it later by going on that 30-minute walk. And I'm really into hair and makeup and fashion and pop culture. So I sometimes brain rot on social media before bed.
Now, when you're talking to the older, the my generation and older, and you say because I think I don't know, it's so funny because I'm the biggest advocate for kids who are trying to do social media. When my students, I tell them, hey, if you have a skill, I think you should try to use that skill and be on social media. You never know, there might be someone who wants to hear it, see it, or whatever. And I think a lot of my generation and maybe older generations think that that's all you guys do is brain rot on social media, like before bed, after, at all times and everything. So when you're talking to people and you're talking policy, have you ever felt like maybe there's some stereotypes that even people you agree with, people that colleagues of yours kind of have for you because of your age and because of who you are and the things that you enjoy that are kind of different from what they enjoy?
When people see me in the community, they see me as a handful of things. They see me as their daughter, like I jokingly get called the daughter of the community, which is kind of cute, or they see me as their sister or their neighbor. And they oftentimes forget that I just turned 27 and that I'm the first person of my generation to ever be elected to public office in this country. And what's kind of cool is I'm able to relate to people because they see themselves in me. So people are actually looking for some version of relatability within myself, which is inspiring to the root because of what we were talking about earlier about my basic existence gets otherized. So it doesn't come up that often. And I think that's what it means to be an authentic, genuine leader.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to talk about before we get going here? I know we kind of went over a little bit, but anything else, anything I missed that you'd like people to know? I'd love to hear it.
This was so fun. I tell people all the time that the conversation doesn't have to end here. I respond to all my DMs on Instagram except for the mean ones. So I'm Bushra Amiwala on Instagram and on all socials. Please keep in touch. My website is bushraforcongress.com. If you liked what you heard, toss a $5 donation or reach out to Phone Bank with us because truly to your point, building the party means by building and uprooting leaders that know what they're talking about, that know other people to bring along for the ride and journey. And the three things that we should hold our leaders to today is consistency, credibility, and relationships. And thanks for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on this channel. I appreciate you guys joining us. And again, please follow Bushra on her social media accounts. Say it again, just so, and I'll type it into the chat here just to make sure.
Yeah. Yes, it's Bushra Amiwala, Bushra Amiwala, and my website is bushraforcongress.com. It's spelled bush like the shrub, ra like the sushi place, Bushra. No, and thanks, Coach D. This was so fun. We talked about anything.
Yes.
Yeah, it could have gone so much longer. So I appreciate it. You're a great
thank you.
conversationalist.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And anytime you want to come on, please just reach out. This was fun. I'm sure, I'll get some feedback from everyone. But yeah, anytime. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it. And I'm going to sign off. Time to get going. So you have a good day. And I wish you the best. I think we definitely need more people like you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.